The truth about my parents. I am an old man now. I live alone in a small house. I have children, but they don't visit me often. Sometimes I feel lonely and I think about my life when I was young. There is one memory that stays with me. It is a memory I can never forget, no matter how hard I try. When I was a boy, I thought my parents were my real parents. They were kind and loving. They always made sure I was happy. They took care of me and gave me everything I needed. I never worried about anything. I always felt safe with them. I thought everything was perfect, but one day everything changed. I was 15 years old and I learned the truth. That I remember that day very clearly. It was a quiet afternoon. I was sitting with my mother in our living room. She was looking at me with tears in her eyes. She took a deep breath and then she said, "I have something to tell you." I didn't know what she meant. I was confused and a little scared. "What is it, Mother?" I asked, looking at her. She took my hand gently, but she seemed nervous. She looked down for a moment, then looked at me again. "We are not your real parents," she said softly. I couldn't believe it. I was shocked and confused. My heart hurt and my mind was full of questions. I didn't know what to think. I had always believed they were my real parents. That I wanted to ask more, but I couldn't speak. The words just wouldn't come out. My mother explained that I was not born in their house. They had found me in an orphanage when I was a baby. They took me in and raised me as their own. They loved me as their own child. That I was surprised and very confused. After that day, I couldn't stop thinking about my real parents. Where were they? Who were they? Why did they leave me? Why didn't they come for me? I had so many questions and I felt so lost. I decided I had to find them. I needed to know the truth about who I really was. The next few days were filled with confusion and sadness. That I couldn't stop thinking about the things my mother had told me. I wanted to know more, but I didn't know how to start looking for my real parents. Where should I go? Who could I ask? My world felt turned upside down and I felt lost. I spent a lot of time thinking about the orphanage. I wondered if it was still there. I didn't know where it was, but I decided I had to find it. One day, I packed a small bag and left the house. I was scared, but I knew I had to go. I needed answers. I walked for hours, asking people if they knew where the orphanage was. Most people didn't know, but some remembered it. It was a small building outside the town. I finally found the place. It looked old and quiet. There were no children playing outside. Everything seemed still. I walked up to the door and knocked. A woman opened the door. She looked at me with a curious expression. "Can I help you?" she asked. I told her I was looking for information about my real parents. I explained everything to her. She listened carefully, but didn't say much. After a few moments, she nodded and said, "I think I remember you. You were a baby when they brought you here." But I don't know where they went that I was disappointed. I had hoped she would have more answers, but she didn't. She told me that my parents had left quickly, and there was nothing left behind. She couldn't give me any other information that I didn't know what to do. I had so many questions, but I didn't know where to look next. I felt hopeless. He said they loved me very much. His words made me feel a little better, but I still had many questions. Where were they now? Why did they leave me? I couldn't find them, and I didn't know where to go next. My heart was heavy, but I kept searching. That I felt so alone after hearing that story. The man had told me that my parents loved me, but they had to let me go. I didn't understand. Why did they have to leave me? Why couldn't they keep me? These questions were always in my mind, and they hurt. For weeks, I kept looking for answers. I visited many people. That I went to different towns, asking about my parents. But no one knew where they were. It felt like I was chasing a ghost, searching for something that wasn't there. That I started to lose hope. One day, while I was sitting by the road, tired and upset, an old woman stopped by. She saw the sadness on my face and asked, "Are you okay, young man?" I looked up at her. "I'm looking for my parents," I said. "I don't know where they are. I don't know why they left me." She sat down next to me. "I can help you," she said softly. "I knew your parents. I know where they went." My heart skipped a beat. I couldn't believe it. Finally, someone who could help me. "Please, tell me everything," I said eagerly. The old woman told me that my parents had been from a small village far from here. They had fallen on hard times, and they couldn't take care of me anymore. She said they were heartbroken when they left me at the orphanage. They loved me very much, but they thought it was best for me to have a better life. The woman told me that my parents had always wanted to come back for me, but something had happened to them. They were forced to leave the village, and no one knew where they went after that. Her words made my heart ache. I finally knew that my parents had never forgotten me. They loved me, and they had tried to come back. But life had been cruel to them. I didn't know what to do with this new information. It was more than I had ever hoped for, but it didn't answer all of my questions. Where were they now? Could I ever find them? I continued to search. I couldn't stop. I had to find my parents, no matter what. The hope I had been searching for was finally in my hands, and I wasn't going to let it go. I kept searching. Every day, I walked through new towns and villages. My legs were tired, and my feet hurt, but my heart pushed me forward. I couldn't stop now. I had learned that my parents loved me, and they had never wanted to leave me. One afternoon, I reached a village I had never seen before. It was small and peaceful. The houses were old, but well kept. That I went to a local cafe to rest and ask for directions. I didn't have much hope, but I had to try. At the cafe, an old man sat by the window. He looked at me and smiled. "Are you new here?" he asked. I nodded. "Yes, I am looking for my parents," I said. They were from a small village. I don't know where they went, can you help me? The old man's face changed when he heard my words. You're looking for your parents? He asked quietly. What are their names? I told him what I knew, that I didn't know much, but I said the names of the places where I had grown up. The man thought for a moment, then said, I remember them. Your mother and father were good people, that I knew them very well. My heart raced. I couldn't believe it. This man knew my parents, that I asked him to tell me more, and he did. The man told me that my parents had once lived in a small house on the edge of the village. They had worked hard and were always kind to everyone. He said that they were forced to leave when their lives became too difficult. They didn't have enough money, and they couldn't take care of me. They were very sad, he said, but they loved you. I know they did. They talked about you all the time. His words made me feel both happy and sad. It was good to know that my parents had always loved me. But it hurt to hear how hard their lives had been. They didn't deserve that. The man gave me directions to where they had lived. It was not far from where we were. I felt a new strength inside me. I knew I was getting closer to finding them. I thanked the man and quickly left the cafe. I couldn't wait any longer. I had to see the place where my parents had lived. It was time to find the truth, even if it was difficult to hear. I followed the old man's directions carefully. I walked through narrow streets, past small houses, and reached the edge of the village. There, I found a small old house. It looked quiet and empty, but I could feel something special about it. I stood there for a moment, just looking. I didn't know what I would find inside, but I was ready to face whatever was waiting for me. I knocked on the door, and after a long moment, it slowly opened. A woman stood in the doorway. She was older than I remembered, but there was something about her face that felt familiar. Can I help you? She asked. Her voice was soft, and her eyes looked at me with kindness. I didn't know what to say. I had been looking for so long, and now I was standing in front of her. My heart beat faster. Are you my mother? I asked, my voice shaking. The woman's eyes widened in surprise. She looked at me for a long time, and then she slowly smiled. Yes, she said softly, I am your mother. Tears filled my eyes. I had found her. After all these years, I had found my mother. She stepped forward and hugged me tightly. I couldn't believe it. I had always wondered where they had gone, and now I was here, with her, at last. Why did you leave me? I asked. My voice full of emotion, her eyes were filled with sadness. We had no choice, she said. Life was very hard. We couldn't take care of you anymore, but we never stopped thinking about you. Every day, we hoped you would be okay. I felt so many different emotions at that moment. I was happy to have found my mother, but I was also angry at the way life had treated us. I didn't understand why we had to suffer, but in her arms, all those feelings seemed to disappear. I realized that she had never stopped loving me, even though we had been apart for so long. I stayed with her for hours, talking and sharing stories. She told me everything that had happened after I was taken away. she told me how hard it had been for her to let go, but how she had always hoped to find me one day. Finally, it was time for me to leave. That I had found my mother, but I couldn't forget the life I had with the family that had raised me. That I couldn't believe it. I had always wondered where they had gone, and now I was here, with her, at last. Why did you leave me? I asked, my voice full of emotion. Her eyes were filled with sadness. We had no choice, she said. Life was very hard. That we couldn't take care of you anymore, but we never stopped thinking about you. Every day, we hoped you would be okay. I felt so many different emotions at that moment. I was happy to have found my mother, but I was also angry at the way life had treated us. That I didn't understand why we had to suffer, but in her arms, all those feelings seemed to disappear. That I realized that she had never stopped loving me, even though we had been apart for so long. I stayed with her for hours, talking and sharing stories. She told me everything that had happened after I was taken away. She told me how hard it had been for her to let go, but how she had always hoped to find me one day. Finally, it was time for me to leave. That I had found my mother, but I couldn't forget the life I had with the family that had raised me. That I couldn't believe it. I had always wondered where they had gone, and now I was here, with her, at last. Why did you leave me? I asked, my voice full of emotion. Her eyes were filled with sadness. We had no choice, she said. Life was very hard. That we couldn't take care of you anymore, but we never stopped thinking about you. Every day, we hoped you would be okay. That I felt so many different emotions at that moment. I was happy to have found my mother, but I was also angry at the way life had treated us. I didn't understand why we had to suffer, but in her arms, all those feelings seemed to disappear. That I realized that she had never stopped loving me, even though we had been apart for so long. I stayed with her for hours, talking and sharing stories. She told me everything that had happened after I was taken away. She told me how hard it had been for her to let go, but how she had always hoped to find me one day. Finally, it was time for me to leave. I had found my mother, but I couldn't forget the life I had with the family that had raised me. As I walked away from the house, I knew I had to make a decision. That I had found the truth, but I still didn't know where I truly belonged. That I spent many days thinking about everything. That I had found my real mother, but I still missed the people who had raised me. That my mind was full of confusion. I didn't know if I should stay with my mother, or return to the family that had always cared for me. One morning, I decided to visit the family that had raised me. I walked back to their house. That it was a small, simple home, just like I remembered when I arrived. They were sitting outside, enjoying the sun. They looked up in surprise when they saw me. How to practice at home. Hello, my friend. Good to see you. How are you? Great. So listen, today I am going to give you lots of ideas about how to practice speaking English when you are alone at home. Home Alone sounds like a film. Are you ready? Let's do it. Hello. And if you don't know me, my name is Connor. I run the channel English 30 Days. So listen, today we're going to be looking at how to practice speaking English when you are alone at home. It's not so easy for many people, right? Maybe there are no groups locally where you can go and chat and speak English, and maybe you're not ready to go on Skype and try to find some random English person to chat with somebody you don't know. That I mean, that can be quite hard, especially if you're a little bit shy like me. So what I want to do today is share with you lots of ideas about how you can practice speaking when you're on your own at home, alone, right? Good. Now, if you do know me, you may be thinking, what's that strange orange block over there, that wasn't there before? True, and this is my meditating mat. Sometimes I sit and meditate on it, sometimes I don't. I'm just tidying at the moment, so I couldn't find a place to put it, so right now it's over there. Okay, the truth about speaking is that yes, you can watch videos, you can watch films, you can listen to podcasts, all of that is great, but at some point, you need to start speaking. And you can speak on your own, but also later you'll need to start interacting and practicing speaking with people, but that's not always easy to do. And so right now, today, I'm going to focus on some really practical, simple activities you can do when you're on your own at home to start practicing speaking. So the first technique is called speak into the mirror. And this is really useful, but it's really, really simple, right? It's easy because you can do this first thing in the morning when you're brushing your teeth, or, well, you can't speak and brush your teeth, but just before you brush your teeth and in the evening before going to bed when you wash your face. What do you mean you don't wash your face in the evening? Why not? My mother always told me, make sure you wash your face, clean behind your ears, wash your neck, scrub your neck. Yeah, wash your face before you go to bed. It takes all the dust and pollution off your face, apparently. Anyway, that's a great time that you can do it. And this is good because the key to learning and preparing for I is habit, right? And if you can attach your learning to an existing habit, like brushing your teeth or washing your face, then it makes it much easier. Now, I used to do this when I was learning Chinese, and in the morning after brushing my teeth, I would just have a few sentences talking about what I'm going to do today in the future, right? Speaking Chinese, today, I'm going to go to the park. I need to go to the supermarket. I'm going to buy some vegetables. I'm meeting Jack at 6:00 that I might go to the home. All in the future. Brilliant. And then at the end of the day, you can talk about what you did or what you have done, right? Today I went to the park. I played football. I went shopping. In the end, I've done a lot. It has been a good day, right? Past tense, present perfect as well. So you can see it's actually great to practice different tenses. It's a bit like writing your diary at the end of the day, right? Which is also a great way to practice writing, but this is speaking in front of the mirror. It's nice, it's reflective learning in many ways. Okay, moving on. The next one I call collocation fun. Right, collocations are words that are often used together, right? Like we talk about heavy rain. Heavy rain in English, we don't say big rain. Today there's big rain, no. There is heavy rain. So these are collocations. Collocation fun is where we're going to practice speaking using a very common teaching method, really based on the task-based approach to teaching, and it's based on prepare, practice, present tense. So we'll be preparing the words, the collocations, practicing sentences, and then presenting a whole talk. Okay. Now the reason I suggest doing this in front of the mirror is that actually there are great benefits of talking to a mirror, right? First of all, mirrors don't answer back like young children or wives. But apart from that, right, when you're speaking in the mirror, you can look at your mouth and you can see the kind of movements that you're making, which is great, right? It's useful for pronunciation. You can also check your body language. You may be surprised to see that you speak like that without ever moving your arms, or that you suddenly realize that you're doing this all the time. That's fine, but being aware of your body language can be quite good. And also, you feel like you're talking to someone. Right? Many people I know, and this happened to me, practiced for a long time with a book, and when I went to speak to somebody in a foreign language, it was like a shock seeing this face in front of me. Oh my God. But practicing with the mirror, you get used to a face in front of you, right? So it does help. So, let's look then, prepare, practice, and present, preparing. What I suggest you do here is take a topic. A recent topic we were studying in the live lessons was science, right? And then get some collocations. You can use your coursebook if you want, you can get onto the internet. You can go to my channel and watch other content like How to Learn English, My Struggle to Learn English, and others, etc. This one's called English 30 Days, and in here, right, you have got free video lessons. You can go through the free video lessons, and there is a recent one on how to learn English, so you can just listen, right? Download the video. Yeah, we want to download that and then find in there all the collocations. Look, you've got the notes here, and here you've got collocations, you've got idioms, you've got loads of stuff. What I would do is I would take maybe 6 or 7 collocations or idioms, like exact science, it's not rocket science, to be on the same wavelength, and that's the preparation, right? That's step 1. Step 2 is in front of the mirror, just make a sentence with it. Right? Exact science, well, parenting, bringing up children is not an exact science, cooking is not an exact science. Frying an egg. It's not rocket science, it's actually quite easy. Right? And then I'm just practicing sentences here. Cooking is not an exact science. Frying an egg. It's not rocket science, it's actually quite easy. Right? And then I'm just practicing sentences here, and then, in the end, after practice, present. I take one of the old part 2 questions around science, maybe something like, describe an area of science you're interested in, and then start to talk about it for maybe a minute and try, if possible, to use some of these phrases and sentences. Right? So you may say something like this: describe an area of science you're interested in. Well, okay, I guess an area I'm interested in actually is cooking, and I know it's not an exact science, but I guess it's a branch of science, a branch of food science, maybe. Right? And I am interested in the science behind cooking. I think it's very interesting. I know with cooking, when you heat things up, they change, and when you mix different things like sugar and vinegar, you get different levels of acidity, and chemical reactions happen. So, I think it's really interesting. Right? I think chefs and scientists are really on the same wavelength because they're trying to experiment, discover new things, whether it's cooking or new dishes, things like that. I know cooking isn't rocket science, but I am interested in how it works, and so yes, although it's not a hard science, I think it's an interesting area of science for me. So, you can see what I'm doing really here is not giving a perfect part 2 answer. I'm just trying to activate and practice some of these expressions that I've been learning, and that's it really. So that's it. It's great because that preparing the collocations, practicing the sentences, and then presenting a talk is a really tried and tested method. Doing it in front of the mirror is great. You get everything, you get the contact with somebody, but you can see yourself, you can monitor yourself. It's really, really effective. Collocation fun. Great. I want to go and do it. It sounds like so much fun. I'm going to do it again right now. I'll be back in a moment, and next up is practice with short audios. Now, I am a big fan of extensive listening, right? Listening to podcasts and films, that's great, but when it comes to speaking, I think short audios are much better. They are bite-sized chunks, they're easy to use, and your concentration is shorter for shorter periods of time. You can work with, for example, recorded sample answers. There are many websites that have those not written, it must be recorded, right? You want to listen and then speak. There's a tool that I've talked about in the past to many of the students here, it's called LinkU. And I like it because it's full of short audios that you can use to help start speaking, and it's free. There is a paid version, but you can get lots of stuff for free, which is great here. So let me show you first of all how that might work. So this is LinkU. Okay. I'm not going to explain how it works. I've got one of my previous lessons here about sport that I will open up, and let me just show you briefly how it works. We'll just focus on the bit on the left. Okay, let's try. Hello Steph. Hello Steve. Nice to see you again. Nice to see you again. So, what I want you to focus on first is as you listen to the sentence, pick out the stressed words. Nice to see you, like to chat a bit about your interest in sports. Chat, interest, sports. So I'm just repeating the stressed words. Chat, interest, sports. Sure, you lived in Japan for quite a few years, I think. Lived in Japan, years, I think. Right? About 9 years. And 9 years. Okay. So, you can see I'm just doing the word stress, and also you can pick out chunks or phrases that you like or that sound interesting, years, and I think you lived in different cities. That's right. I lived in Sendai for 4 years, which is a little bit north of Tokyo. A little bit north. A little bit north, that's interesting. Which is a little bit north, right? Not in the north, not located in the north, it's a little bit north of nice Tokyo for 4 years, and then 1 year down south in Shikoku, down south. Interesting. Not in the south, down south. Okay. And did you play any sports when you were in Japan? A little bit. A little bit. I love that, a little bit, a little bit. Played a little bit of soccer. I played a little bit of soccer. A little bit of soccer. Isn't that great? So, you can see I'm picking out either the stressed words or little phrases or chunks that I like, and this is really helping us listen, prepare for speaking. Next, what you'll do after you've finished, if you want, you can check the transcript as you listen again. That's fine, but at the end, what I would like you to try and do is try to repeat the audio or the lesson, giving a summary. So, repeating it with your words, not reading, not listening. In fact, you can just close that and focus on your own words. Right? Oops. And then after you've done that and you've done a bit of practice, you could then try to retell the lesson or the story and record yourself. If you're not sure, you can use mobile apps to record your voice. There's Vocaro, which is also a very simple online voice recorder, and recording yourself is great because it puts pressure on you, and that, my friend, is good. Also, you can then, once you've listened back, go and compare to the original lesson or story with the transcript, and see if it's different. Did you make a mistake? Instead of saying, a little bit of football, did you say, a little bit football? Or did you use different collocations? Right? Instead of individualized sports, did you say, personal sports? Something different. That noticing again puts pressure on you, which is great, and it also helps you notice. Noticing language is a kind of feedback, which is essential to improve. So you're copying their body language, their gestures, their facial expressions, their accent, their voice, their words. You're copying everything, and this can be very, very helpful to reduce anxiety or stress. Especially if you're shy or you don't want to be embarrassed about mistakes and not speaking correctly, when you have this mask to hide behind. It doesn't matter because you're being somebody else, and it's great fun to do this with actors and actresses you like. Let me show you a very, very simple example. There's a great actor called Rowan Atkinson. You may know him for Mr. Bean, but he plays a myriad of characters, and one of the recent ones is Johnny English. Right, let's have a look at Johnny English. I'm not sure, let me clear up the uncertainty for you. You have it. Let me clear up the uncertainty for you. You haven't. Right? So, it's about taking the character, trying to do the voice and the whole body, and you become that character, and you can do that when you're practicing speaking on your own. Right? You probably don't want to do it when you're out and about at the shops or speaking to foreign people, like, hello. They'll think you're Johnny English. They'll think you're mad. But when you're having fun at home, it can be a great way to practice. So that's it. Imitate your favorite English-speaking actor. The next one is to send audio messages. Right now, if you're using Facebook, WhatsApp, or other social medias that have a chat facility, often we send text messages. You probably send them in your own language, but you could think about sending them in English. Right? And go a step further, send an audio message rather than a written message, because that will be practicing your English. Okay, you can do this if you have some friends who maybe speak English, or family members. You can have a bit of fun with them, practicing sending messages to each other in English or any other language. Right? I mean, we do this sometimes. It can be quite fun to do. And the great thing about sending audio messages is it's not like a live phone conversation where the pressure is there. You have time to prepare, to think about what you're going to say, to record it, and if you don't like it, delete it and record it again, but it doesn't have to be perfect, right? It's just about practice, not perfection. Practice. So, sending audio messages is a great way to do it. Next up, imitate the English foreigner. Now, I'm sure most people can imagine or know how English people speak your language, right? If you've got tourists, or you've met people from other countries who speak your language, how do the English people speak your language? Right, take that sound, that accent, and start to use it. So, for example, let's imagine I'm Spanish, right? And I'm thinking, so, how do English people speak Spanish? Right? They don't speak perfectly. They speak with an English accent. Right? So the Spanish person would try and speak Spanish with the English accent, right? And then switch to English, but keep that accent. Hello, how are you? I'm fine, thank you. Can you hear that? The same pronunciation and accent is easy to switch, and suddenly my English sounds English. It sounds great, right? That's it. I'm doing an example with Spanish, but you could do it with any other language. Right? Think how English people speak your language with that accent, and then switch to English, keeping that British accent or English accent or American accent. It really can be quite useful and fun to boot. Great, now, the next idea is shadowing. Of course, a shadow, right? If the sun is shining down on the floor behind you, you have a shape the same as you, right? Dark. That's your shadow. The sun leaves a shadow, you leave a shadow. And to shadow someone is to follow somebody. So, if I shadow you, it means I'm following you. Sometimes, detectives will shadow suspicious people, right? Now, in language, when we shadow somebody, it can be just to repeat them, but you're very close behind them, right? Remember, wherever you go, your shadow follows, very closely. So here, the thing to do is to find a short audio and to listen for maybe a minute, and to repeat almost on top of the voice, but maybe a fraction of a second behind them. So you're just behind them, but you are really following them, very, very closely. Do not wait for the sentence to finish and then repeat. This is different. This is being really close behind them. And it forces you to pick up on word stress and intonation, and if you focus on those two things, it really can help build up that speaking skill, word stress and intonation. Let me kind of demonstrate. So, we've taken from Q-lips a little audio. First of all, I recommend you listen to the minute completely so you've got an idea of what it's about, and I've already done that because I'm well prepared. And then, second time, you listen and shadow. Let me show you how close we are behind it. I'm going to use my phone so you can hear properly. So, Jeremy, let's get into it. Talk about how to talk about pots, how to talk about movies and music, and the kind of artwork that enriches our lives. This topic was suggested to us by one of our listeners, and she sent us an email, which I will read for everybody now. It says, "Okay, I think you get the idea, right? So, it's different from, wait, listen and repeat. It's shadowing, following closely. At first, it's very hard, but the more you do it, the more you'll be noticing word stress, intonation, even accent. I noticed I was picking up a Canadian accent about it. That is shadowing. Let's move on. So, we've had shadowing, right? Now, we're going to look at responding. What is responding? Well, put very, very simply, responding is you hear a question, you get an idea, you give an answer, you respond. The biggest problem students have is that they practice, they take a question, they know the question, they've prepared it, and they practice giving answers. Right? What happens in the exam? Well, surprise, surprise. In part 3, you get strange questions you weren't ready for. What do you think of globalization? And what do you do? Well, first of all, have something to say about globalization, right? Make sure you've done a bit of research on the topics, get some ideas. What do you think of globalization? And what do you do? Well, first of all, have something to say about globalization, right? Make sure you've done a bit of research on the topics, get some ideas. If you don't know, you can always say, "Oh, I haven't thought about that, let me see." Right? Use a time filler to gain time. Let me see. Right? I didn't know what to say. I wasn't expecting that. I just couldn't get my ideas out and speak. So, you need to practice responding, where you hear a question, and you've got no idea what it is, you get an idea quickly, and you answer, right? It's a bit of pressure, but as I mentioned before, a bit of pressure is good in your practice. Now, you can do this if you have a speaking partner really effectively, right? So, what you do is, one of you says, I'm going to bring into our next session 5 questions, and you don't know what they are, and the other person does the same. You come into your session and ask each other these surprise questions. It's a shock at first, but it's like anything, it's like going down to the gym. You just practice this, and you build up the skill. If you haven't got a speaking partner, you can do a bit of practice on my YouTube channel, right? If you know my YouTube channel, right, English Spoken Stories, hidden away in the playlists, go on the playlists. There's lots here that you've probably never seen, and at the very bottom, you'll see 2 episodes which are very useful for you, right? And then, the next question, let me just play it for you. And you'll see. Let's press shuffle, and it plays automatically. Do you like your hometown? Oh, that's a good question. Do I like my hometown? Yeah, I think my hometown, Manchester, which is up in the north of England, is a very attractive place. There's lots here that you've probably never seen, and at the very bottom, you'll see 2 episodes which are very useful for you, right? There's lots of restaurants and shops. It does attract quite a few tourists as well, and they often come in to see the industrial landscape or the football pitches. We have a famous football team called Manchester United. And Manchester, do tourists like to visit your hometown? Yeah, there are quite a lot of tourists who come to visit my hometown. So you see what's happening, right? It's just automatically asking me the next question, and I practice responding because I don't know what the questions are because it's shuffle random. So, you can practice that. You can also make your own, right? Set up your own YouTube channel. Don't worry about people finding it. They rarely do, and you just put some questions up with a gap for the answer and then shuffle, and Bob's your uncle. Fantastic, that's it. The next suggestion is to describe what you are doing. And I know a lot of teachers suggest this as a way of thinking in English, right? So, when you're out and about, maybe in the park, and you're seeing different things, you describe what you see. Now, I suggest you start with words, right? So, there you are, out and about in the park, and you see, bicycle, person, path, trees, bag, woman, phone, and you're using words, right? And then, as you're walking around the park, you make collocations, little chunks of language, riding a bike, a long path, a cluster of trees, the woman glued to her phone, picnic, having a picnic, maybe, right? And then you go on to make sentences. Okay, this is a bit like that we mentioned earlier, the prepare practice present. So, you're going from words to collocations to sentences. Right? Oh, there's a man strolling in the park. There's a woman riding a bike. And also, there are lots of trees. There's a woman glued to her phone and she looks like she's about to have a picnic. And you go on and on and on, right? Great. You can do it in any context. You can do it at home, or when you're out at the shops, wherever. Now, you may think and you may say, yeah, but Ariel, you can't go around the streets talking to yourself. People think you're mad. Well, yes and no. Right? Nowadays, put these on, right? Nowadays, people walk around and they're on the phone and they're like, hello. Yeah, John, yeah, I'm in the park, actually. Yeah, it's lovely. There's a man strolling over there. There's a woman riding a bicycle, yeah, I'm good. How are you? Right? That's perfectly normal to be talking to yourself in the streets, right? Hello, yes, there's a man walking along a path. There's a woman riding a bicycle,